as mountains of flowers sprouted outside Kensington Palace, Diana's home. People stood for up to 7 hours in long lines to sign condolence books at St. James Palace, where Diana's body rests in the Chapel Royal. In Paris, a judge placed 7 photographers under formal investigation for allegedly causing the car crash and failing to help the princess and 3 others as they lay trapped in the wreckage.
This accident wouldn't have happened but for these people.
These people are 7 photographers. Nicolas Arsoff, who works for the SIPA agency, Sergei Arnal of the Stills agency, Christian Martinez of Angeli, Romuald Rat of Gamma, Jacques Langevin of Sigma, Laszlo Veris, a freelancer, and Stefan Darman, driver of the Gamma motorcycle. They now face possible criminal charges, as well as the scorn of people who believe the motorcycle-riding pack drove Diana to her death.
If that's the case, I'd like to drag them behind my car.
But is that the case? And if these paparazzi are criminally prosecuted, what charges may they face? All 7 are under formal investigation for involuntary homicide and allegedly failing to help the crash victims, which is a violation of France's Good Samaritan law. The Princess and Dodi Al Fayed left the Ritz Hotel with the paparazzi in hot pursuit early Sunday morning. Eyewitness accounts say their car appeared to be speeding more than 100 miles per hour. An accident reconstruction shows the Mercedes entered the Paris traffic tunnel at a high rate of speed. But what made the driver lose control, slam into a concrete pillar, and spin around? Did the pursuing paparazzi cause a deadly distraction? Or was the driver fatally impaired by alcohol? The Fayed family wants to know.
We condemn in any circumstances whatsoever drink driving. It is appalling, and we want the full facts investigated.
A new toxicology report puts the driver's blood alcohol level at nearly 4 times the French legal limit. And he reportedly taunted photographers by saying, "Catch me if you can." While these revelations may lessen the paparazzi's ultimate responsibility for the deaths, it will not absolve them in the view of some. A lawyer for the Fayed family says the driver's intoxication was just a link in the chain of tragedy caused by the photographers. And certain eyewitness accounts say some photographers tried to push aside rescue workers so they could get better photographs. The French daily Le Figaro reports that pictures taken by photographers at the scene show not a single helper aiding the victims as they lay in the steaming wreckage. And as the sole survivor of the accident, bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones remains in intensive care. The world waits for him to speak.
I think the bodyguard would be able to tell us something. I mean, he was there, he can give us the testimony which is so vital.
His words may shift the criminal blame away from the paparazzi. But for now, as Princess Diana is mourned by her family and by millions who never knew her, some ordinary people think they know where the fault lies.
You just hounded the girl to death, and you're still here with your cameras, aren't you?
If convicted, here are the possible penalties that these photographers face under French law. On the failure to help, the so-called Good Samaritan law, a maximum of 5 years in prison. Involuntary manslaughter for causing or contributing to the accident, 3 years in prison. A lesser charge of recklessness for a deliberate violation of safety rules, 1 year in jail. Right now, we should tell you all 7 photographers are free. 2 of them posted bail and the other were released on their own recognizance.
And meanwhile tonight, in protest, other French news photographers are refusing to take pictures of the 7 under investigation. And one of their attorneys calls the investigation theater justice. Immediately following the crash, police took the 7 into custody, including one aggressive photographer who is said to have felt the dying princess's pulse while snapping shots of the scene. Well, joining us now to discuss the legal possibilities and the criminal sanctions that these men may face, in New York, Tony Fioranelli. He is a freelance photographer who covered for a time Princess Diana. Also joining us tonight is Anthony Kahn, an expert in the laws of France. Mr. Kahn practiced law for a time in France, and he is currently a partner at Couder Brothers. First to you, Mr. Fioranelli, do you want to be so bold as to defend the actions of your colleagues here?
Well, it's not so much defending the actions of the colleagues as it is, you know, the system, the way everybody gathers photographs to begin with. You know, there's a demand for photographs, and there's people out there that are going to fill the demand. Now, depending on the photographer himself, depending on how he's going to go about getting that photograph.
Well, Mr. Kahn, over to you. It's not just about the photographs in this particular case, is it? Is there not in France a requirement to act when you come upon the scene of an accident? And were these men perhaps criminally liable in a way they might not be in the United States?
That's correct. Unlike in the United States, there is in France a strict obligation on the part of onlookers to an accident to assist. If they can do that without endangering themselves, they cannot simply leave the scene or fail to help out. They're obligated to call for help or possibly to help people in danger, as long as they don't endanger themselves by doing so. Well, and failing to do that is a crime.
Let me throw in this twist. Isn't it true, first of all, that in France, generally those who are prosecuted under the Good Samaritan law are actually involved in the accident themselves? And second of all, you know, here in the United States, people get sued for trying to help people in trouble. And that, in a great many ways, has discouraged people from being good Samaritans. Not only that, we're often taught that in a case of severe traumatic injury to the head, to the neck, to the back, don't touch him.
Well, that's certainly true, but the law is quite different in France, where one is encouraged by the law, since if you fail to meet this obligation to help out, you could be in violation of the law yourself.
Would it be a defense to these photographers to say, look, we thought we might make matters worse?
Well, that's certainly true if there was nothing that they could have done, but it remains to be seen what the evidence will show, and if they continue to take photographs when something might have been done to call for help or to assist the people in the car, that would be a different story. Mr.
Fioranelli, of course the reports are preliminary at this point, and we'll learn more in the coming hours and days and indeed weeks. But if indeed there were photographers checking the princess's pulse or standing on the hood of the wreckage and taking pictures through the windshield, would that not appall you?
I tell you, I've taken photographs on plenty of accident scenes, and I wasn't there, so I don't know. But just by looking at the wreckage, looking at the car, it dictates that how are you going to get these people out? It's a twisted wreck. I don't see how anybody other than a professional rescue worker can extricate these people out of the car. How can they blame a photographer that's not trained in removing people from a twisted wreck? You know, in their deaths or anything that have anything to do with that.
Well, let's bring into our conversation somebody who may be able to help answer that question. And the Honorable Kim Worthy is our legal navigator for the evening. She is a judge in Detroit and a former prosecutor there. What do you think of the Good Samaritan law, which by and large doesn't exist here in the United States?
I think, as you have pointed out, that I'm not sure it would be successful here because of the great litigiousness of the Americans in society here. You would certainly risk, or you would invite, in some cases, lawsuits if you tried to help someone and it was proven or shown or even speculated that you made it worse. So I have to agree with you on that point, that I'm afraid that that wouldn't work here. It's good in theory, it promotes good neighborness and all that other kind of stuff, but I don't think that it would work here. Go ahead.
Well, Kim, it seems as though there are those who are suggesting that these photographers should be prosecuted for what was perhaps just bad taste in photographing the scene of this accident.
In my view, there's a vast difference between not just helping someone or in aggravating a scene and acting with pure callousness. If it is true, and I repeat, if it's true that they knocked people out of the way and trying to gain photographs, or they were just standing on the scene getting in the way of the investigation or doing things like that, that's totally a different matter than if you just stood around and did nothing. And there have to be, I'd be interested in knowing what the origin of the Good Samaritan laws are in France that caused these laws to be passed in the first place.
All right, Judge Worthy's going to stay with us. Gentlemen, you stay with us as well. We're going to look at that and much else on this case. Diana, of course, one of the most photographed women in the world, and she often courted the press to promote herself and her favorite charities. But should her private life have been off limit to the paparazzi? That's up next on Primetime Justice.
Every proprietor and editor of every publication that has paid for intrusive and exploitative photographs of her, encouraging greedy and ruthless individuals to risk everything in pursuit of Diana's image, has blood on his hands today.
Celebrities and the media have always had a complicated relationship, with each depending on the other to maintain their status. Some say giving up privacy is the price one pays for celebrity, and in the past, celebrities lived with constant intrusion. But lately, a new breed of celebrity has gained prominence in Hollywood and elsewhere. They're fed up with the paparazzi and say they won't put up with their antics anymore. Leading this movement is George Clooney, the star of the latest Batman movie and television's ER. Clooney began by refusing to appear on any network that airs paparazzi videos or photos of him. And soon, many of his influential friends in Hollywood, such as Steven Spielberg, joined his boycott. Well, today, after the death of Princess Diana, Clooney appeared at a news conference to speak out about the media.
Now, let's open the discussion about privacy, not just for celebrities, but for everyone. If an outlet buys pictures and the photographer has committed a crime to get these pictures, then that outlet should be held responsible. Legitimate news sources like the LA Times and Network News should draw a clear line in the sand. Do not purchase your news. Do not use tabloids as a source. You define the difference between tabloid and legitimate news. Do your job. Inform responsibly.
Well, George Clooney, whose father, by the way, is a journalist, says he doesn't want to censor the press, but he would like to remove the need to prove malicious intent to hold media outlets liable for slander or libel.
Well, as the 7 photographers being detained in Princess Diana's death were placed under formal investigation in Paris today, the spokesman for the Fayad family says he may file a civil lawsuit against the paparazzi. But as Helena Cadis reports, when it comes to establishing civil liability in France, the standards are different than those in the United States.
It was in the 1960 Fellini movie La Dolce Vita that the word paparazzi was coined. Off-screen, paparazzi hounded Princess Diana, even at the scene of her death. But did photographers violate her right of privacy or the privacy of her friend Dodi Fayed? The answer depends on the country. In France, invasion of privacy laws are considered the most strict in Europe. French law is essentially this, that everybody has the right to respect for his or her private life. French courts have broadly interpreted what conduct violates that right, even photographs taken on public property without consent. But it's a different story in England, where there are substantively no invasion of privacy laws at all. From the day she married Prince Charles, Princess Diana has had to live with flashing cameras in her face. And what about in the United States? Just ask Bill Cosby or Alec Baldwin, both who have tried physically stopping photographers from capturing their and their families' images. It landed them in court as defendants.
He didn't do what photographers do, which is say, take your hands off me.
In the U.S., there's no federal law protecting one's privacy. Instead, it's left up to states. For the most part, what's published has to be intimate or highly sensitive, and media generally have a defense if what's published is newsworthy. But the paparazzi weren't all bad to Princess Diana, who used the media to her advantage, whether she was auctioning off her dresses or speaking out about landmines.
The years of civil war in Angola have left behind a deadly legacy.
Some say the crash and death of the princess will result in paparazzi letting up. The editor of the National Enquirer is asking that no one buy photos of the crash scene.
We've had a love-hate relationship with Princess Di. This is a senseless tragedy. It never should have happened.
If the Fayed family does file an invasion of privacy lawsuit in France, under French law, even if they prevail, there's a cap of $60,000 in damages. And critics say that's just not enough to deter paparazzi from doing this again. Greg?
Helen, thanks. Let's talk about money and the responsibilities of an inquiring press, an aggressive paparazzi, and indeed the First Amendment, an invasion of privacy. Joining us on those subjects is Cameron DeVore, a media attorney in Seattle. He specializes in First Amendment and privacy issues. Thanks for being with us. And Jane Kirtley joins us from Washington, D.C., Executive Director of Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. Ms. Kirtley, first to you. Should there perhaps be a code of good behavior that journalists ought to strictly adhere to? Maybe some have suggested they ought to be licensed.
Well, there has been a lot of discussion in the media industry in the last couple of years about coming up with some kind of national code. The last time we tried to do it with the National News Council, it was a dismal failure because some of the major media chose not to participate in the process. I think that there's a significant difference with the media in this country and many other countries around the world. We don't have a licensed press, and I think that's part of our strength because it means no government agency decides who is fit to be a journalist. That technique is used in many countries to keep dissident journalists silent. So the question is, who would come up with this code of ethics? Most news organizations have their own, and they enforce it with their own employees. But I think the discussion that's been going on in the last couple of days shows that reasonable people can disagree about what the ethics of a situation would be. And I think it would be very difficult to come up with a code that everybody could agree to.
And celebrities are pretty powerful in their own right, are they not? They can protect themselves.
Well, they are. I mean, I don't have a lot of sympathy for this protect celebrity movement that we've been hearing in the last few days. I was gratified to hear Mr. Clooney say that we should be protecting everybody, not just celebrities. I don't know how you're going to define a celebrity or to suggest that they're all exactly the same. Some are reclusive, some are flamboyant. Should the same standard apply to each? And should they, who profit so much from media attention, be able to essentially control it? I'm not sure that's in the public interest either.
Well, Cameron DeVore, you specialize not only in First Amendment law, but also in privacy issues. How about it? Do celebrities lose the privacy interests, the privacy rights that the rest of us enjoy? We've seen Brad Pitt recently fighting with the magazines to keep his nude photos away from the public. Of course, we've seen Bill Cosby and Alec Baldwin and many others over the years, not the least of whom was Jackie O. What do you think? Is there no privacy for the celebrity?
Pretty much that's the case, really, under our law. And it really is, as was said earlier, a matter pretty much of state law. There is no real federal law. But it's generally accepted law in this country what the law of privacy is. And when somebody really is in the public domain, they don't have much of a surrounding penumbra that protects their lives. They really are legitimate subjects for public discussion. I'm very leery of the possibility of some kind of law that attempts to say there's the bad press and the good press, and we'll let the good press do what it does, but there's the bad press, and we won't let them do what they do. I think we have very well-developed laws in this country with a First Amendment underpinning that really do mean that you have to do some intrusive, very intrusive things if you're going to be held guilty or liable for invading someone's privacy. And that has to be an invasion of a private zone. There's a very complicated set of facts in this situation because whatever kind of pursuit took place, and there clearly was some kind of pursuit, we just don't know about that yet. The facts are unclear. But photographs taken in a public street, a public thoroughfare, or even if you're standing on private property taking photographs in a public area, those are things that the courts in this country have by and large protected. And I think that's a very important protection for us all.
Mr. Khan, I mean, you are an international lawyer. You have French clients. I thought French law was a lot stricter in terms of privacy rights, and yet all of these paparazzis allegedly were in chase and shooting photographs. Why is it that wasn't stopped?
Well, I think that the chase itself was not a violation of the privacy laws in France. It may have been a violation of the involuntary homicide laws, and we will find out based on the facts. But the chase itself occurred on a public street. Nevertheless, the French law is very much more protective of individuals' personal lives, whether they are celebrities or private individuals. So that distinction is not made. A person's personal life is kept private. It is considered not to be newsworthy in many respects, and certainly photographs taken without the individual's consent are illegal.
And what of the intoxication of the driver? I want to ask you about that and whether or not that insulates some of these photographers from any criminal and civil liability. We'll be back in just a moment. We're going to pause. Perhaps the tragic death of a young princess will not be in vain. We'll be talking more about that as well. If anything can and should be done to protect public figures from an aggressive and intrusive paparazzi, what is it?
We've lost something irreplaceable.
Let's hope everybody remembers what's happened and to make sure that at least the princess gets in peace. Sorry.
In life, Princess Diana championed many noble causes: AIDS, cancer, the homeless, leprosy, the elimination of landmines. But now in death, will she also champion yet another cause, the right to privacy? Because of how she died, people are talking everywhere, it seems, about reining in the inquiring lens of the photojournalist. Back out to you, Mr. Khan. You're a lawyer involved with French clients. You know the French law. Does French law allow the intoxication of the driver to essentially insulate the paparazzi from liability?
Oh, I don't believe so. I think there may be a share in the blame, but if it can be shown that the photographers interfered with the progress of the car or in one way or another were a cause of this horrible accident, they can be held liable civilly, and of course they can be held for the involuntary homicide charge.
Let's go back to Tony Fioranelli, of course, a freelance photographer who has in the past covered Princess Diana. Let's talk a little bit, not about the law, if you will. Let's talk about the bounds of decency and good taste. Is there no duty upon photojournalists, paparazzi, even journalists, print journalists, etc., to self-regulate, to perhaps exercise some good judgment?
That's a good question. You know, it depends on the photographer himself. Like I said before, you know, you have to look inside your own heart to what you're able to do to get the photograph. In this particular case, I question hotel security. I mean, if you have a mob of photographers outside, before you send anybody out, before you bring a decoy car around, set up barriers and say, listen, you know, you guys should go in this car. This is where you can go. You can't go past this point. You know, and the people are going to get their shots coming out. But, you know, when you send somebody out the back door, I don't know how these people think. See, I'm not a paparazzi. I am a news photographer. But I do on occasion have to cover that. And it stirs the interest on, okay, where are they going? Why are they leaving out the back door? Are they hiding something? Are they going someplace special?
Well, and Tony, you also know that you can get more money for your photographs if you get a secret sort of intimate rendezvous between the two as opposed to an established, prepared shot out in front of the Ritz.
That's the point. If they would stop and take their picture, there's not going to be any money involved with that. You're not going to make any money.
So, Jane Kirtley, do you trust the individual photojournalist or paparazzi, however they might be classified, to self-regulate, to look into their heart, as Tony Fioranelli suggests, particularly when you look at the millions of dollars that are paid for some of these photographs?
Well, I'm not sure that there's any alternative as a matter of law. I mean, what are you going to do? Do what they're doing in California right now, which is introducing laws that would make it a crime to take a photograph of an accident scene? And as in Michigan, where it's a crime to take a photograph of a shipwreck. I mean, these are both bills that are pending in the state legislatures. I think that the issue does lie with the individual, and probably equally or maybe even more so with the publishers who make the decisions about whether they're going to buy those photographs. I mean, we've been hearing a lot in the last few days about these paparazzi being vultures, taking photographs of the accident scene. I think that there are valid reasons to take photographs of an accident scene. It's a separate issue as to whether a publisher is going to decide that those pictures are just too grisly, too tasteless to run in his or her publication. I think that that's an editorial decision that has to be made by the news organization.
But the accident has already occurred. The editorial decision happens after the death of Princess Diana and her companions, and Now the decision has to be made after the damage is already done as to whether or not those pictures will be printed.
Can I interrupt a second?
I mean, let me just say that, of course, you're right about that, but I think that you have to look at this in the context of years and years of practice that have built up, especially in the last year or so, of certain publications creating a market in response to their readers' demands for photographs like this.
I'm sorry, there's nothing decent about a photograph of a grisly body in a car accident, nor is there anything newsworthy about it, and that's why it may very well be against the law in France, and I don't think it would infringe our First Amendment rights, or should, in this country.
Well, I have to disagree, if only because the law enforcement people seemed extremely eager to confiscate that film right at the site, an act that I might add would be of doubtful legality here in the United States. It seems to me that there's a clear evidentiary value to those photographs. Whether we want journalists to be an investigative arm of the government is a question for another day. But to say that those photos had no value, I think is just flat wrong.
I
they
think
become a matter of record.
They may be a violation of law in themselves if they were taken, as they obviously were, without the consent of the photographed party.
In terms of publication under French law, you're of course right about that, but that is again a separate issue. It has to do with the rights of that individual, perhaps as a matter of civil law. Maybe they can file a criminal complaint. You would know that. I don't know that. But again, what does that have to do with the issue of whether they are of some value in the course of this investigation? I would simply submit that photographs can be used for a variety of purposes, and to say categorically we're going to prohibit any pictures of a crime scene is saying that we will never allow there to be an independent assessment of what happened there. All we're ever going to hear is the official report.
Last question to Cameron DeVore in Seattle. Isn't it possible these journalists may in the end become scapegoats simply because the price that was paid, the death of a beloved princess?
I think Americans always love to have a simplistic answer to things. You know, you need somebody to blame, you need a devil. I think we are properly and extremely skeptical, and I think that's a constitutional issue, about taste, about legislating taste, about legislating these things, and particularly when we have a First Amendment that says that government is not supposed to get into this picture. We leave it in this country to the press to really regulate itself. That has problems. We don't have a unitary press. We don't have the same standards in daily newspapers and network television as we have in some perhaps fringe organizations or otherwise. But those are risks that the First Amendment, I think, requires that we run. We've got plenty of laws to hold these paparazzi liable, reckless endangerment, negligence, things of that sort, without trying to legislate taste as a matter of what journalism can do in news gathering.
All right, and that's going to be the last word for tonight on this sad subject. Thank you to all of our guests. And